Okay, as we continue our preparations really for Pesach, because what happens is at the beginning of Adar, when you think you're getting ready for Purim, really it's really a march to Pesach because the four parshiot, Shkalim about the yearly donation to the temple, and then Zahor, the destruction of Amalek, and then the one we're going to talk about tonight, the third, which is Para, which is about the Para Aduma and people getting themselves purified so they can bring the Korban Pesach. And then the week after that, which we'll talk about next week, is Parshat Chodesh. So these are, as I wrote at the top of the page, Parshat Para, getting ready. And out of all of the preparations, Bisman HaMikdash, when we had the Holy Temple here in Yerushalayim, the most important preparation was Parshat Para, because you wanted to be ritually pure so that you could bring the Korban Pesach, you could bring the Paschal lamb, Erev Pesach, and eat it at the Seder. And there actually are some commentaries that believe that it's obligatory to read Parshat Para. We don't really paskin it as a halacha, but the position exists that reading Parshat Para is obligatory because we are supposed to do our best to purify ourselves in our preparation for the Geula, for the Pesach Seder, and re-experiencing the Exodus from Egypt. And in the temple days, that included preparing yourself to go to the temple, which included, of course, becoming tahor, and the process of becoming ritually pure included the para aduma. And so that's the verse I have at the top of the page. Kol hanogea b'meit benefesh ha'adam, anyone who touches the corpse, the dead body of a human being, asher yamut, who has died, v'lo yischata, and he has not become purified. What does he do at Mishkan Hashem Timei? If that person comes to the Mishkan, the portable temple, and later the magnificent Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, that person gets karet, is cut off from the Jewish people. And so nichata hanefesh ahi mi Yisrael, that soul is removed, it's cut off from the Jewish people. Ki me nida lo zorak alav, because the water of Nidan. Now, if you look in the translation that I have underneath there from JPS, they use a word that I have no idea what it means. They said the water of lustration. So I looked up lustration. Lustration is based on a Latin root that means purified. I don't know why they just didn't write waters of purification. I guess they just wanted to confuse us. But anyways, the word lustration, which means to purify, gives us the English word luster, which is, like, I don't know what you can do with that piece of information, but it's interesting. Okay, the luster, because this water of purification was not thrown upon them. Here it says dashed, but it means to throw upon them. So they remained pure, and their impurity was upon them, and so you can't go to the Beit HaMikdash or the Mishkan, the temple or its earlier versions, without purifying yourself. And if you do, you are chayav karet. You are liable for this terrible punishment. So I want to take a look at two commentaries right away that talk about this mitzvah. And then the rest of the commentaries on the page are going to talk about this in terms of getting ready for Pesach as part of that four-step progress towards the holiday of Pesach. So right underneath is Rabbi Steinsaltz, and Rabbi Steinsaltz, Olav Shalom, he basically translates the verse with an expansion of the ideas just a little bit. So he says the potential consequences of not purifying oneself with the ashes of the red heifer, which had to be only reddish brown hairs. A few years ago, in the 90s, a perfect red heifer was born up north, and like an idiot, I went to go see it. I don't know why. It's just a calf. It's very cute. I got to pet it actually, but it's not red. It's sort of brownish, sort of rust color is the color that they're talking about. But this cow, this little calf, made it to 1 year old, and they were hoping that it was going to become a paraduma. But right after its first birthday, it developed 2 white hairs, and that was it. It couldn't be. So I assume it ends up becoming food at some point. But we went to see it. It was, I don't know why. It was just a calf. But okay, it was just interesting. So they're not actually red. Like I said, they're brownish, ruddyish rust color. Anyone who touches a corpse of a person who has died, does not purify himself, and enters the tabernacle has defiled the tabernacle of the Lord. That person shall be excised from Israel, because the water of sprinkling was not sprinkled upon him. He shall be impure, and his impurity remains upon him. And we consider it to be a terrible sin. Correct. He's cut off from the Jewish people. Continuing on this idea, please go to the bottom of the front page, where the Kedushat Levi, Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, continues talking about the concept of Para Aduma, not specifically related to our preparations for Pesach, but the idea bigadol in the grand scheme of things. And he says, we subscribe to the rule that God did not reveal to us the innermost reasons, the individual commandments of the Torah. Basically, he's saying we call this halacha, the chok, the unexplained mitzvah, as if all the others are explained. But Reb Levi Yitzchak is saying to us, no, that's not true. We really don't know the reasons for all the mitzvot. We think of ideas, we have some concepts, but we really don't know for sure. And it's important to periodically not know. Why? Reasons for the individual mitzvah. Nevertheless, by giving the Torah to us, God, he also encouraged us to try and understand as much as we could. As the better we understand the meaning of the commandments, the greater the love with which we perform them. We do our best, even though we know we don't always necessarily get it right. By introducing this portion with the words Zot Chukat HaTorah, this is the unexplained mystery of the Torah. This is a decree without any reason you can understand. God hinted that we must remember that basically the entire Torah consists of a string of commandments, and that all that has been revealed to us is what is needed to enable us to perform these commandments in the proper way. We do the best to perform them. The reason isn't as important, because the reason we do them is God said to do them. And we like to have rationales. We'd like to explain things as best we can. But the real reason to do is Hashem said it. We just do it. One reason why the rationale for the commandments has not been revealed is to ensure that we observe them, because God has so commanded us. Why do we do any mitzvah? Hashem said to. And not because we agree with God's reason. And I know we look at a mitzvah like, don't embarrass your neighbor, or don't gossip, or don't kill. We say, oh, that makes sense. Oh, I know why we keep this. But the real reason the Rebbe is saying is because God said it. Knowing the mitzvah, it's nice and it helps us sometimes, but the real reason we keep mitzvah overall is to fulfill God's will. This principle enables us to understand that the ashes of the Red Heifer have been chosen to be the vehicle whereby we cleanse ourselves ritually after having become contaminated in one way or another through contact with a dead body. We have to remember also that due to the origin of our souls being immediately below God's throne in heaven. Now, we believe that the highest level of heaven, the seventh level up in heaven, is God's throne. Right below the throne, I guess you'd say 6 levels up, right below the throne, that's where human souls come from. They emanate from that point and then come down here to heaven, according to Kabbalists. I mean, I'm just telling you what they say. I don't understand it at all. The soul is naturally anxious to carry out all God's desire. Since our souls were born right below the divine throne, we want to always do what Hashem says. The body, being a product of this earth, opposes the urges of the soul as a matter of principle. So my soul is saying, yeah, keep kosher, while my body is saying, no, go eat treif. In other words, the soul wants to do the right thing, but the body is always, weak and wants to just be lazy or just enjoy itself. Opposes the urges of the soul as a matter of principle. Whenever we succeed in defeating the opposition of our bodies to perform God's commandments, we accumulate merits for ourselves. Whenever we withstand those temptations, we should pat ourselves on the back. We should feel good about ourselves. In view of the above, when a person dies and his soul has departed on its way to rejoin its maker, to make its way back to that 6th level of heaven, in the celestial regions, the body has been bereft of every spiritual stimulus and becomes ritually contaminated. In other words, what formerly housed my soul is now it's now a ruined vessel. And we view that as a source of contamination on the ritual level. This is also the reason why, according to our sages, the bodies of the righteous do not confer ritual impurity on people who contact them. Now, this is a fascinating halacha, and there are many, many stories about people that opened up coffins, graves of great tzaddikim centuries after they passed and said that the body was still in pristine form. I'm skeptical. I'm just reporting that such stories exist. But the idea is that the tzaddik never did anything in his life or her life to contaminate the body. Everything they did was pure, so the body doesn't deteriorate, which is why Kohanim do go in to certain kvarim, to certain grave sites of tzaddikim, especially Marat HaMachpelah, where Be'ezrat Hashem I'm going on Wednesday for an upsharing of a grandson. But Kohanim, many, not all, but many Kohanim will go in there saying that the tzaddikim and tzidkaniot, the righteous people that are there, aren't mitameh, don't give anyone any impurity. As these bodies become refined already while the souls inhabited them, so that they had become willing partners in performing the commandments of the Torah. Normally we think of doing mitzvot as a fight, a constant battle. My soul wants to do it, and my body says no. We think of it as a strife going on all the while. But the real tzaddikim, their body and soul, somehow get together in such a way that they do not become defiled. An allusion to this is contained in the word Zot Chukat Torah. This is the chok, the statute, the unexplained law of the Torah. On account of the Torah being a statute containing laws whose meaning has not been revealed, as a result of which most bodies refuse to cooperate with the souls. Generally, the body wants to do what's physical, and the soul wants to do what's spiritual, and they tend to be in strife. These bodies are now punished by becoming a source of ritual contamination for people that come into contact with them. So this is talking about the general background of this entire idea of ritual impurity from corpses. The Meishi Loach, who is the Ishbitzer Rebbe, is going to expand on this idea. So he's the second paragraph on the back of the sheet. And he says, there are three ways that evil does not reach the depth of the life of Israel. So the three things that prevent wickedness, ra, evil, from overtaking our lives. First, loss or death doesn't really befall them. For death in Israel is not like death in the nations. One thing is that helps us to stay pure and focused is because we believe that we continue to live on in some way. And our death is not like the death of other nations, other people. With nations, death is like a vessel that is broken and cannot be fixed. With Israel, death is like a vessel made in sections that is merely taken apart. And part of it is buried in the ground. Part of it goes back up to heaven to where it came from. Second, Israel has never been under the yoke, the old of a king or ruler at any time, because we understand that all is really in the hands of God. Jews never, even though we are subjects to presidents and kings and queens, we never really give over, if the person is religious, never really give over the entirety of our loyalty, of our love to these people, because really we understand Hashem, God, really is our sovereign. And third, King Shlomo Melech praises the wisdom of Israel versus the nations, for no nation has an understanding of God as Israel does. So that what's going on with these rules about the dead body of a Jew, we have all these rules because a Jew with the neshama inside is such a special, unique object in the universe. Going on, the reason why the passage about the red heifer comes before the death of the three shepherds. Now, this is not talking about why we read this parsha now before Pesach. It's talking about when we get to chapter 19 in Numbers. When you get to chapter 20 of Numbers, immediately Miriam dies, and about 10 verses later, 15 verses later, Aharon dies, and then within the year, Moshe dies. So we want to have the rules in place for people becoming impure, because we were going to be losing our great shepherds from this wonderful family that led the Jews for the 40 years. So the three shepherds, Miriam, Aharon, Moshe, that's in order of, by the way, that's in order of their birth, but also in the order of their deaths. Is in order to let Israel understand, know that they should not be distraught. We shouldn't say, oh, it's all over. We don't have Miriam anymore. Oh, how can we live without Moshe? No, we shouldn't say that. Why? For there is no death, as it is usually understood. They didn't really die. They stay with us. And they stay with us in the sense that their souls go to heaven. We believe that. But even more so, they're with us because we read the Torah and we still listen to them and their advice. They still lie. They still guide our lives. The sprinkling of the waters of purification made from the ashes of that red heifer hints that in the future, all will return to them. In the future, God will reveal his glory to Israel without any separation whatsoever from physical and spiritual. Everything will be spiritual. The people that are around at the time of the final Geula, B'mehera v'yameinu, should come speedily to us here in Eretz Yisrael. We're going to understand how there is no longer a clash between the physical me and the spiritual me. They'll live in consonance together. For now, this reality of life exists in the depths of Israel. We know it in our souls, but our bodies sometimes rebel. Yet it is hidden and only revealed in garments. By garments, he means the outer layers of which is our flesh and our bodies. These garments are the Torah and mitzvot. We keep our physical bodies in check by fulfilling the mitzvot and learning Torah. That's what helps the neshama to control the physical part of me. For one may only enter into the depths of God's will through the Torah and mitzvot. And that's how we can, even in this world, become someone whose death isn't impure, because we can be like Moshe and Aaron and Miriam, none of whose grave sites we know. So those are a couple of grave sites we can't visit. But Baruch Hashem, we do have the grave sites of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, and Leah, and we can get inspiration from them. I want to go back to the front page now. I want to go to the Orach Chaim, and the Orach Chaim, and for the last 20 minutes or so that we have, we're going to talk about Para Aduma and Chukat Torah in terms of this week, as part of our process of getting ready for Pesach. So we spoke for a few minutes about Para Aduma as being something that helps us to see the importance of spirituality in our lives. And now we're going to see it more as a preparation, getting ready for Pesach. The Orach Chaim. It is strange that the third major stricture which the Torah warned the Jews of regarding the observance of the Passover ritual. Now, as we started getting ready, we started getting ready for Pesach by giving the shkalim for the Beit HaMikdash. Then by getting rid of Amalek, you can't have spirituality, you can't get the Torah, it can't be redeemed without getting rid of Amalek. And now we're on the third step, which is becoming ritually pure. And so we without the purity, we can't observe the Pesach, namely that it must be eaten by people who are ritually impure, did not feature in the legislation as it applied to the Jews of Egypt. The Orach Chaim has a question. How come we didn't learn about getting rid of ritual impurity until halfway through the book of Bamidbar? Why didn't Moshe teach us to become pure before we left Egypt? Because before we left Egypt, we had to eat a Korban Pesach. We had to be pure. So why doesn't Perek Yud Bet, chapter 12 of Shmot, tell us, and be pure, now you can eat the Korban Pesach? In other words, the entire chapter that talks about eating the Korban Pesach doesn't say you have to be pure. So the Orach Chaim says, why? Why did we wait so long to tell you this rule? Why did God not care about this at that time of the redemption? It is true, of course, as you are all aware. I don't know about that. I'm not sure I was aware of this before I read it, but okay, the Orach Chaim is being nice to us. That if the majority of the Jewish people were to find themselves in a state of ritual impurity due to contact with the dead, the rule about eating the Passover while in a state of impurity is relaxed, as we know from Pesachim 67. There is a famous rule in the Gemara that Tuma is hutra b'tzibur, that we don't worry about impurity if for some reason the vast majority of the Jewish nation is impure. And then we, for that year, let the rule go. And it actually happened in the time of Chizkiyahu that they brought a Korban Pesach after one of their wars, and there was Tuma everywhere. But because the vast majority of the nation was impure, they brought it. So don't say that that's what happened in Egypt. Everybody was impure, so you didn't need to teach people how to become pure. So don't say that, because he's going to give us another reason. Nevertheless, God could have at least commanded that the Jews in Egypt should endeavor to be ritually pure before eating the Passover. You'd think that at least be a line about it's better to eat it when pure if you can. Moses could have prepared the ash of a red heifer to facilitate the process of a Jew cleansing himself of such impurity. Moshe Rabbeinu did this para aduma. Why couldn't he have done one 40 years earlier before they left Egypt? By the way, we believe that the ashes from the para of Moshe Rabbeinu lasted until the building of the first Beit HaMikdash. That lasted for hundreds of years because you keep watering it down and so it stayed with them all this time. So he could have done it 40 years earlier. Even the whole Passover legislation for future observances, as detailed in chapter 12 in Parshas Bishalach, Parshas Bo, does not mention the need to be ritually pure. It talks about in the future when you're going to keep Pesach. Well, one can come up with various excuses to why ritual purity inside Egypt was not feasible. The Torah should have at least mentioned this as part of the requirements of the Pesach observance. When you reflect on what we have written above, you will find that there's a perfectly good reason why the Torah ignored the requirement of ritual purity while the Jews were still in Egypt. Why? The Israelites did not need to purify themselves because they had not been defiled through contact with the dead in the first place. You know why? They weren't Jewish yet. If someone converts and they go to the mikveh, they come out of the mikveh, and the Bet Din declares that they're Jewish, they are ritually pure. Anything that happened before the conversion does not affect them because they're a different being from what they were before they went into that mikveh and were declared Jewish by the Bet Din. So that's what happened to the Jews. Why? Moreover, even assuming that the Jews could contact ritual purity as soon as they had converted by circumcision and the denial of idol worship, such a conversion took place only on the 14th of Nisan, the day when we celebrate Pesach on the 15th, but we bring the korban, the sacrifices brought in the afternoon of the 14th, as they prepared to slaughter the lamb. Any so-called ritual impurity, which was contracted before that date, would be automatically canceled as it had been contracted by a different person, a Gentile instead of a Jew. They only became Jewish at that moment. So that's why they didn't bother, the Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu didn't bother telling us about these rules until later when we were getting ready to go into Eretz Yisrael, when it was going to be applicable all the time when Jews wanted to go to the Beit HaMikdash to bring korbanot, and especially, for Pesach. Theoretically, Jews should go to Yerushalayim 3 times a year, each of the pilgrimage festivals. But we know many Jews didn't go every holiday. But the 2 holidays that they mostly went for, at least at the end of the temple period, in the first century of the Common Era, and this we know from Jewish and Roman sources, the 2 times when Jews really went out of their way to go to Jerusalem was Pesach and Yom Kippur. Even though Yom Kippur was not a pilgrimage festival, the Jews just wanted to be there to see the sending away of the Sa'ir Lazazel, the scapegoat that went into the wilderness. I assume that many of those Jews stayed the 4 more days and were there for at least the beginning of Sukkot. But those, according to historical records, hundreds of thousands of Jews descended on Yerushalayim for Pesach and for Yom Kippur. And to come to Yerushalayim, they would go out of their way to become ritually purified through the sprinkling of the Parah Aduma water and going to the mikveh. Okay, please flip over to the backside, and I want to take a look at the Sfat Emet. The Sfat Emet, just like we were just talking about, is going to look at the Parah in terms of being part of our preparation for Pesach. So the Sfat Emet, the Gira Rebbe said, these 4 parshiot, Shkalim, donation to the temple, Zachor, destroying Amalek, Para, becoming pure in time to bring the Korban Pesach, and Parshat HaChodesh, which is when we celebrate the making of the Jewish calendar, which began on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. We count our years from Nisan. I know there's Rosh Hashanah in Tishrei, but the real ritual beginning of the year is Parshat HaChodesh here soon in Nisan. So these 4 parshiot appear to follow a pattern. The first 2 and the last 2 are similar. In what way? He explains. It follows the verse, create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. This idea of asking God to renew me is a beautiful idea. I wish I was a better singer. There's a beautiful song about becoming a pure a pure neshama before God, and it's almost like, I mean, we don't go through this process, but for the people that go through it, it's almost like a rebirth. There was people that wrote about it. It's very, very special. And so he goes through one of the 4 stages. The first one is shkalim, the giving of the coins, the half shekel, which is the poll tax and pays for the upkeep and the sacrifices in the temple, represents a generous heart. First thing you have to be is nadiv. You have to be generous, philanthropic. You have to care. You have to give of yourself and of your property to others, through which one merits ruach chayim. We begin with being nadiv, pleasant and generous and forthcoming, and then we get a ruach chayim, a spirit of life. Why is that important? Because it's that life within us that allows us to defeat Amalek and all those forces that want to destroy us. Later, one must adjust their giving spirit to make sure that it is pure without impure parts. So first, we are nadiv, generous, philanthropic. Then we get rid of the evil around us. We get rid of Amalek. But then we look at ourselves and say, well, if I'm being kind and generous and nice, why? Am I doing it for good reasons? Am I doing it for bad reasons? Am I trying to butter somebody up? Or am I doing it sincerely because I really want to be a better person? And so that comes to para, where we really think about the purity of our goals, purity of our thoughts, purity of our actions. And then God renews in us, Chadesh renews within us the spirit. And that is Parshat HaChodesh, which is what we're going to talk about next week. That we get this sense of, oh, I do have a second chance. I can get back to where I once belonged. I can renew myself. I can, do tshuva. I can be what I always dreamed I was going to be and was disappointed that I didn't get there. We say, well, you can still do it. You can be a good person. You can be all that you want to be. And that's Parshat HaChodesh. And we're going to talk about that idea next week, please God. Actually, we can only achieve purity after we have disposed of Amalek. We can only be pure people after the evil urges around us have been destroyed. Now, remember, the Sfat Emet, of course, is a Hasid, and the Hasidim look at Amalek not as a nation state like the Torah did. They look at Amalek as an idea of evil. And the Rebbe speaks a lot about destroying the Amalek within us. So getting rid of Amalek, I have to get rid of all of my negative urges before I can purify my body. If I purify my body while inside I am still desirous of negative anti-Torah ideas, it didn't help. I have to first be in the right spiritual place Then I can physically become pure. Actually, we can only achieve purity after we've disposed of Amalek, both the Amalek around us and the Amalek within us. The power of Amalek is the lack of an inner life. Being Amalek means not having a neshama inside, not having a conscience, not seeing the goodness inside all humanity. It is following extraneous urges, divorced from our inner spiritual reality. We must eliminate that before becoming pure. So we had to have Amalek and Purim before Amalek and Haman, right? Before we have Parah this week. Once I've destroyed the evil influences around us, now I can go to the mikveh. Now I can be sprinkled with the paraduma water. And then, and only then, I can renew myself, Parshat Chodesh, which again, we'll talk more about next week. Rav Elchanan Samet is really talking about the Haftorah that we're going to read this week. And Rav Samet, a very nice man, is a Rebbe at Yeshivat Har Etzion. Many of the modern commentators they put on the page teach at Yeshivat Har Etzion. And he's talking about chapter 36 in the book of Ezekiel, the book of Yechezkel. And so we'll see what he says, but I'll read the verse he's talking about inside in just a minute. Perhaps we can suggest another significance for the metaphor of purification through the sprinkling of purifying waters over Israel as they return to their land. So he's not talking about the actual para aduma process. He's talking about it as Yechezkel did as a metaphor for leaving Galut, leaving the diaspora, exile, and coming to Eretz Yisrael, and we want to become pure. The purification is indeed from all your impurities and from all of your idolatry. The purification process not only gets rid of ritual impurity, touching a dead body or something like that, but it means getting rid of our sins as well. But attention should be paid to the verses that immediately follow. And again, this is getting us ready for next week. And what do these two verses say? And I shall give you a new heart, Lev Chadash, and a new spirit, Ruach Chadashah, shall I place within you. And I will remove your Lev Shel Evan. I remove your stony, hard, harsh heart from your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. And I shall place my spirit within you, and you shall ensure that you will walk in my statutes. The purification of Israel from the impurity of their sins involves something like the resuscitation of a body that had no living, beating heart within it. It's almost like a heart transplant, is what we're talking about here. In other words, the reawakening in us of the purification process is supposed to give us this excitement of a new chance. It's a little bit like Yom Kippur in that sense. And there are people that talk about, Purim is related to Yom Kippur because Purim is Yom Kippurim, like Purim, because in both cases, we're getting rid of the negativity and moving towards the positive aspects of spirituality and life. This description is similar to the next one in the following prophecy. Now, the next prophecy, chapter 37 of Yechezkel, is the Haftarah for Shabbat Chol HaMoed Pesach, and everybody knows this one. It's the valley of the dry bones, and the bones come back to life. So what Rabbi Samet is saying, that our passage about purification is to be seen in the same light as the actual animation of the dry bones in the next chapter 38 of the book of Yechezkel. It's a rebirth. It's a renaissance. And we have to feel that way. We have to feel, I'm new. And we're going to talk again about that a lot more next week. The idea of becoming chadash, new. Then concerning the dry bones, behold, I shall open your graves and bring you up from your graves, O my nation, and I will bring you to the land of Israel, and I will place my spirit within you, and you will live. You will live again. It sounds like a scene from a Frankenstein movie. It's alive. We really do come back to life in a very real sense. Even if we didn't actually die, even if the death is metaphoric, even if it's discussing a death of my spirituality died. I lost my will to be good and to be pure. Even that one we view it as a reincarnation, a reanimation. The return of Israel from exile to their own land is like the revival of the dead. And we have to believe this too, that making aliyah is also a rejuvenation. It's really also, finding a new path in life and feeling alive like we didn't feel before. And it's something that we all experienced. And it's something, wow, it's very, very special. It is the revival of a nation that was dead in exile. And now we've got a president and a government and an army. We're a real people. In chapter 37 is the physical aspect of this symbolic revival that is emphasized, while in our prophecy, which is the Haftarah we're going to read this Shabbat, the prophecies, the focus is on the spiritual aspect. Before we can really be new, we have to spiritually come alive. And that's Para Aduma, that's Para, and that's the Haftarah from Yechezkel for this week, that God's going to give us a living heart, not a heart of stone anymore. The spiritual, moral, and religious revival. That's what we really want. That's what we really want to work on. The idea of the Para Aduma. I just want to read something from the Torah Tamima that I didn't put on the sheet, but and I should have. I found it after I had put the sheet together, and he says that this whole section teaches us to perform an act of great importance. This action is carried out publicly in sight of the entire nation. There's a Kohen sprinkling on you, and everybody watches in front of the sanctuary. The Kohen, who represents the whole nation, proclaims during this act the importance of this chatat, purification. In this way, he, the Kohen, representing the nation, teaches all of Israel the truth, which is the foundation of ethics for the life of the whole nation. And that announcement is: a person can be clean of all sin. You can be pure. I remember, as a rabbi and a teacher, people saying, Rabbi, Yom Kippur, I'm no good. I know it's not going to help me. We can never say that. What we learn from Parshat Paro, what we learn from this entire process is no one should ever say, I can't become clean. Everybody should say what the Torah Tamima puts in their mouths: a person can be clean of all sin. One should strive not only to be free of whatever transgression they may have done, but also to remain free and cleansed of all sin. That's what we have to believe when we read these passages, as we're preparing for Pesach, similarly to when we prepare for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We have to believe that it's possible to put the impurity, the sins, the terrible actions behind us. And we have to believe that we can go forward as better people than we were before. This idea, which we do twice every year, of course, Rosh Hashanah, and now getting ready for Pesach, are fundamental to Judaism. Judaism is totally against being pessimistic. The idea of saying, I can't do it or I'm not good enough, these ideas don't exist in Judaism. The whole idea that the Torah Tamima wants us to take away from this entire process is I can not only be free of transgression, but I can remain permanently free from all sin and impurity. And it's that belief that carries us forward through our Jewish calendar, through our year, and gets us ready for Pesach. And when we really believe that and feel that, and when we get to Pesach, we can really believe, yes, we can be redeemed. Yes, the Geula Shlema is on the way. But we first have to have faith in ourselves that we can be good people. Then we can truly have that belief that the nation will speedily be redeemed. And the more we believe it, the closer we get to the Geula Shlema. Okay, thank you very much. Next week, we continue with this idea. What does it mean to renew? That'll be for next week. Thanks for joining, and Bez Hashem, see you next week.